Now, President Barack Obama defended his administration's approach to the Libyan crisis today, emphasizing that, hey, it was an international mission and that other countries are going to be taking over in just a matter of days. Now, optimistic words from an optimistic president. Joining me to make sense of all this is independent journalist and war correspondent Keith Harmon Snow. Keith, thank you so much for being here. Now, you heard what the president had to say, so was all the hand-wringing about another protracted conflict a waste of time? I mean, Obama said we're almost done, right?
It's interesting that he says that it's immediately going to transfer over to the other folks when it was supposed to be an international coalition that we would support. And also he says at the end of the first paragraph of one of the speeches that he gave, to relieve the burden on the U.S. military and the nation's taxpayers, it would be shifted to an international coalition. This is such nonsense. If they cared about America's taxpayers who are funding all of these wars, they would take some serious steps not to be involved in these kind of things.
Yeah, I love how they just pick and choose when to emphasize the international part of it and when not to. But I mean, if you look at Libya, I mean, this is a country that most Americans probably couldn't place on a map even if you had it labeled. So why do you think we choose this so-called just cause and not the myriad of other oppressed countries that we typically ignore?
Gaddafi's an easy target. First of all, the media is now saying, and the administration is saying, that there's less than 2% of the world's oil comes out of Libya. This is nonsense. Libya is a significant oil producer with massive concessions across the country that involve Italy, France, the United States, and Britain. Oil operations, big oil in there. Gaddafi is an easy target. It's easy to take him out at this point because they knew that he was weak. He was weak because he had militias that supported him, and the U.S. had allowed these, and the coalition had allowed these rebels to generate a movement against Gaddafi, which included a very nationalist, popular uprising component. And then once Gaddafi rolled against these other forces, these rebel forces, to justify taking Gaddafi out by having already convinced the American public for the last 40 years that Gaddafi is the #1 terrorist, when, as you were pointing out, why Libya? When you've got massive terrorist countries being run by terrorist war criminals, including President Yoweri Museveni in Uganda and President Paul Kagame in Rwanda. So the argument that Obama made that this is a warlord running a country is just nonsense.
Well, the thing is, though, I don't really buy the whole war for oil argument, because if you look at what happened with Iraq, for example, I mean, I think even the most hardened neocon can see that that whole invading a country for the resources just doesn't work. I mean, it takes, you know, it's the Pottery Barn rule, right? You break it, you pay for it. By the time you actually get the operations up and running, you don't really have very much to make money off. So I don't know if I really buy that.
So what is it, Lucy? Do you think that it's about selling defense weapons or testing new weapons that the United States might have?
You tell me. You're the guest. Well, weren't they supposed to test the F-22s? I haven't seen anything about those being deployed. They
are definitely testing new weapons at this very moment. This is just another American illegal, discredited adventure in attacking people and calling it humanitarian and justifying on the basis that supposedly it's humanitarian, it's for the best of the world, but really it's about seizing control of Libya and making sure that any popular uprising in Libya is eliminated, and at the same time advancing our interests. Oil, defense, uranium, gold in Libya. These are big mineral concessions available.
Now, you know, the two words that you frequently hear from this administration is the whole limited intervention. This is supposed to be a limited intervention, right? But I've read some analysts calling the whole concept of a limited intervention to being akin to a gateway drug for expanded conflict. And if you do go through history, I mean, almost all of the multilateral interventions in recent times, from Korea to Somalia to virtually every single case, there were multiple UN resolutions authorizing even greater and greater military involvement in the conflict. So can we expect that this is also going to turn out into another drawn-out war, or do you think that this will be limited as they claim?
It's hard to say, Lucy. Could be quick. It could be the plan is and always has been to just go in there, send in 110 Tomahawks in the first set of bombing sorties and a bunch of planes and do some massive damage, and then pull back and say, okay, let's clean it up, France. Let's clean it up, Italy. Let's clean it up, Korea. Let's clean it up, Japan. Oh, no, sorry, we can't use Japan anymore. So that may be the plan, and it may have been, yeah, exactly.
Too soon,
so
too soon. Too soon,
so
too soon.
Sorry. So it may be that there's going to be a protracted conflict here, which is also that's what the United States wants, another protracted conflict. And on one hand, Obama's saying, well, we don't really have the capacity to get into this. We just have to make some strikes, and it's for the humanitarian purposes. We don't want to charge Americans, taxpayers, too much money. anyway and put a burden on them. So a few strikes here and there, and we'll be out quick. That's what we do. We have done that in the past. For example, Grenada or Panama, two fairly quick operations that we mopped it up, killed off anybody who would say anything that we didn't like, and then took control of the country. And at the same time, we don't know. It could be short, it could be long. It's hard to say. If Algeria gets involved, if Egypt gets involved, if some of the Arab League countries get involved, and it's interesting to look at who they are, because some of them are very much in the American camp, like Somalia and Djibouti. Djibouti has one of America's biggest bases of covert operations in Djibouti. So it's very interesting to look at the so-called Arab League and their position. First, go ahead, we support the humanitarian intervention, and then, wait a minute, what did we get involved in? It's like, what did you guys think you were signing up for here?
Right. Well, you mentioned some of the previous conflicts, Grenada and some others, so I do want to get a little bit into the historical context here. Of course, the action in Libya may have been a surprise to some Americans who may have voted for Obama thinking that, I don't know, he's going to pull us out of these previous wars. Well, it turns out that waging war has been almost a rite of passage for the last few U.S. presidents.